and welcome to the Shuffle Squad channel here, where we're going to be talking about the meta one more time. We're going to be doing it for Louisville. Louisville's coming up this weekend, so you're going to want to know what to play, what the meta is going to be like, how to play the decks that you're going to be playing, what decks to expect when you're at the regionals, whether you're just staying home and playing cups and challenges, or maybe just trying to not get hit by a hurricane. And I hope that you don't, and I hope that you can watch this video. But we're going to be talking about all kinds of things Pokemon related, so stick around and make sure that you're getting the input that you need. And I have lovely guests here, as always, on the panel. The first one we're going to introduce is Nolan. Nolan's here with us right now. Nolan, why don't you introduce yourself to everybody watching and where they should know you from?
I'm Nolan Randall. Been a player for quite a while, but kind of getting into the more competitive side this year. I live in Canada, in the Toronto area, and I am known, I guess, recently for my top 8 finish at Baltimore Regionals with the Cornerstone Ogre Pond Noivern deck.
Very cool deck. I love that. I love any kind of like walling decks, alternative win cons, things like that. So happy to have you here. We're going to be talking about a little bit of that as we get into this meta forecast. But next, joining us here, we do have Eliza. Eliza, where should the people know you from?
Everyone should pretty much just know me from Twitter. I don't have any regional finishes or anything. I mean, I have a few top 128s, but they were all bubbles to miss day 2 and stuff like that. So people either know me from how much I yap, or they don't know me at all most of the time.
But definitely has a good idea on what the pulse of the meta is going to be. Goes to a lot of regionals. So Eliza, glad to have you here on this panel. And last but certainly not least, the Miraidon King himself, Jesse Parker, is joining us here. Jesse, where should the people know you from?
I play a lot of Pokemon, so you probably see me at a lot of any major event. I try to go to as many as I can. I know my most notable finish is obviously recently getting third at the World Championships in Hawaii. And then I got this last season got a couple top 8s as well as a couple top 32s. So this last season went really well for me. So if you probably see me at least one of those events.
Perfect. Well, glad to have you here, Jesse, as always. We're going to be talking about the first thing that comes to mind when everybody thinks about this meta is the Dusknoir decks. They're everywhere, right? Everything's got Dusknoir in it. Pidgeot's even got Dusknoir in it. It's just a Dusknoir world. So we're going to be talking about, is Dusknoir a gatekeeper of other types of decks? Is it something that is splashable in almost every deck? So we're going to start off with you, Nolan, first. What do you think about Dusknoir? Have you played up against a host of different decks, and which one was your favorite, and which one was your least favorite to play against?
I played a decent amount with the Dusknoir decks and against them a bit on ladder and had some locals and such. So there's like the main ones. There's the Dragapult Dusknoir, there's the Charizard Dusknoir, then the heavier Dusknoir lines of like Trapagos and like the Palkia, the Net, etc. In my testing, the best one I found so far is the Palkia. The Palkia Dusknoir just has like the ability to like board wipe turn 2 up to like 3 Dreepies or Charmanders or such. Just really seems to be a powerful option in the meta. Not a lot of fun to play against, certainly, so very much so like a go first format. And you really have to be ready for these decks, and they really punish a lot of your slower decks and your stage 2 decks and such. So I think Palkia does that the best of them all.
Perfect. Now, Eliza, input on your end would be something, if you're looking at all the decks, whether you're looking at the Limitless platform, where we see a lot of online decks use Dusknoir, and then we see these past couple of major events, if we're putting 2 and 2 together, which ones do you think that you're going to see at Louisville in the highest counts? Which ones are we going to see, maybe top 2 Dusknoir decks that we'll see?
If I had to pick the top 2 Dusknoir decks, Terapagos is number 1. I think Terapagos is going to be there the most. For second, I really think it's a tie between Zard and Dragapult. I feel like Zard runs it. Obviously, it runs it. Dragapult runs it. I think both of those are going to be seen in pretty high numbers. Dragapult seems to be on the upwards trend, so I would say Dragapult's going to be second, but Charizard is still just that consistent machine it's always been, so I wouldn't be surprised if Charizard is more popular.
Gotcha. Now, Jesse, I want to get your opinions. Do you agree or disagree with that? I know that recently you told me before we started recording here, you've been playing a lot of Pokemon these past couple of days in preparation to go to Louisville. So, do you think that decks like Dragapult are going to be really oppressive? And what are your thoughts on Charizard? Because I know that last meta forecast, we kind of hinted that Charizard was not as good anymore, but maybe we see an uptick of Charizard here.
I think the best Dusknoir deck is by far the Terapagos Dusknoir
Okay.
because I just think like you're pairing like you basically the way I see it, it's like a very low to the ground deck
Mm-hmm.
at its core. I mean, you have Terapagos, you have Knocked Out, but then like you can focus all of your rare candies on Dusknoir.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with Palkia, you know, you're having to evolve from a basic two prize Pokemon. So immediately, you know, your matchups against Raging Bolt are going to be a little bit worse because, you know, you have to put down a basic Pokemon and they could like Pokemon catch or KO at turn one.
Right.
Whereas with the Terapagos, you can create like a full single prize board and like basically like not lose that matchup at all if you like execute your game plan. So I would say number one, just for that reason alone, I think Terapagos is the best. It's just like the most consistent in general from what I found.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, I would say would definitely be Dragapult. I think Dragapult is very, very strong. It's definitely a little less consistent than you know
Mm-hmm.
maybe even a Palkia or a Terapagos.
Okay.
But you know, you have the this giant stage two Pokemon that is like really good against those decks. Like it's really good against like against the Terapagos because you just like they don't the Terapagos deck doesn't have an easy way to deal with a huge 320 HP Pokemon.
Mm-hmm.
At least not a very you know clean way to deal with it. So yeah, I would say like Terapagos number one, and then Dragapult number two, and then Palkia number three. I'm not super hot on the Palkia version. I've just never been a huge fan of like the Pokestop Night Stretcher decks. I
Mm-hmm.
think they can definitely pop off for sure, but that deck is even more and it's even more important to go first with that deck. Whereas with Trapagos, you can like go second and get down two Bouffalants. You know, if you play the
Right.
Bouffalants and have a much more stable board state. And Charizard, honestly, I still don't really, I'm still not really the biggest fan of Charizard to be honest with you. I think the
Yeah.
deck is like not super strong right now. I think it's like it's obviously good. Like it's never gonna be. I don't think the deck's ever gonna be like bad. But I don't know. Its matchup spread just doesn't seem super great right now. I don't know. And the results kind of speak for themselves. I mean, there hasn't
Right.
really been that many in top cuts recently. I think there was like one in top eight at one of the events. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, that's kind of how I feel about those decks at the moment in
Yeah,
general.
that's kind of what we've been seeing for the North American regionals, and I think that Charizard is one of those decks that can find its way if there's a good pilot behind it. But I think that overall, if people are going to pick Charizard, I think you're exactly right that the meta overall doesn't seem that great. I think that Terapagos is a weird matchup for Charizard, realistically, and that's kind of where my head's at. Is we're going to see a lot of Tropicos. You are favored into Raging Bolt, which is probably going to be a pretty big meta share, but that's about it. Once you get into the other stuff, the random jank or the variance that we like to call it, that's where Charizard kind of loses it. Plus, it takes a pretty bad matchup to the next deck that I want to talk about, and that's one that we're seeing do really well at a lot of different tournaments, and especially in multiple tournaments with the same list. It's going to be Lugia. So, Nolan, I know you as a semi-control player, at least as of recent, right? We were playing the Noivern and the Cornerstone. What do you think about Lugia in our format right now? Do you think Lugia is posed really well?
Yeah, I like Lugia. I don't like Lugia as a deck, but I think Lugia is a really strong choice right now. I think of the decks around, I think it stands up really well against the Dusknoir decks.
Yeah.
Um, like when you look at decks like Gardevoir and such, they really fall off hard to that pressure that they're able to apply. I think people aren't respecting Lugia enough as they should be. Sinnohs and Hammers, some decks are playing them, but it's not as prevalent as they likely should be. Um, I think Lugia just all around has a solid matchup spread. You only have an iffy matchup into two Lightning decks, and everything else seems pretty winnable and pretty good for the deck. Yeah, and I think it doesn't suffer from having to go first in this format like some decks like Charizard do. So I think it has a good chance in this format, and I think it's a good call for Louisville.
Cool. All right, Eliza, as far as Lugia goes, I know that you've put some spicy text inside of a Lugia deck before. We've talked about this many a time. Lugia Espathra is probably not going to be a high count on the MetaShare graphic, but what do you think that people are going to be putting into their Lugia deck if you're choosing to play Lugia this weekend? Are you going to be looking at Rahul's build pretty heavily, or Kieran Farah also did really well with Lugia in Baltimore? And I've played that list. I played it and won a cup with it. It is a super consistent list. But what are you thinking as far as teching around these new Dusknoir decks with Lugia?
So there's really two main builds of Lugia. You have the regular 2/2 Chino line, the build that we've seen since Legacy Energy has come out that's been fairly popular. And then you have the Rahul build, which is a lot more focused on that consistency. It runs that Squawkabilly, that Raikou. It runs a lot of those two prizers and cuts down to a 1/1 on the Chino. I think if I had to pick which variant I was going to play for this weekend, it would be the 2/2 Chino build, but I think Rahul's build specifically is stronger against Dusknoir decks just because it has two prizers that are able to sustain more of those rather than just getting curse blown up on my Minchino before I can even evolve it or even after I evolve it. And so I think Rahul's version is stronger into the Dusknoir variants. I just prefer the stronger Chino lines because it gives you the ability to set up late game a one prize board state, which isn't really a one prize board state because Dusknoir is in the format and is so prevalent. But I feel like against a lot of decks that don't run it, like that Raging Bolt, like Reggie Drago, I haven't seen lists recently that are running Dusknoir in there. But I feel like if you're able to get those matchups, setting up the one prize board state is just so much more important. And so I would go without the Rahul build, but I do think the Rahul build is better.
Got it. Got it. Okay. And Jesse, I kind of want your opinion on that. Do you agree or disagree that the Rahul build is better than the Kieran build? And are we going to see more rats this weekend? Or are they scared of being blown up by Cursed Blast? And then the other question is, I know that previously, you had played in Baltimore Lugia, so you have some experience playing this deck at a regional. And one of our own TSS members had also come up with a spicy build for Lugia a while ago with the Iron Hands heavy build. Even put a Mew VMAX counter in there at one point when Gardevoir was big. So again, which build do you think is better? What was your experience playing Lugia, and then how would you build it going forward?
Yeah, after I saw the Lugia list that that did well at Worlds, there was not one that made top 8, but Rahul did get ninth, and there was quite a few in top 16 and top 32. So I think the deck overall had pretty decent representation at that tournament. And I honestly, when I first looked at Rahul's list, I was like, what is going on here? There's like so many random one ofs. There's like, I mean, Squawkabilly, I get it. Raikou, like why Raikou? Like only a 1/1 Cinchino? Like I don't know what's going on here. But then when I like played the deck, I realized that it's like it is just the best way to play Lugia from what I've found. It's like very, very like you have a lot of options. Like you don't always use Cinchino, but honestly, even when you're playing a 2/2 Cinchino, you're only really ever using one. So playing a 1/1, it's just kind of like you use it maybe like every other game. You don't use it every game. And then the games you don't use it, you have Weird Ear to take a big one hit KO. It's like one or the other. You're never reusing both. But then, so yeah, I think Lugia is very strong. I think Rahul's build is the way to play, and he's proven it. I mean, he's got 3 top cuts with it. So like, if that's not proof that it's the best way to play, I don't know what is. So yeah, props to him for that. But I think Lugia is one of the strongest decks against a lot of these Dusknoir decks. I think it depends on the deck for sure. But I think the reason for that is Iron Hands. I think Iron Hands is one of the best counters to these Dusknoir decks because a lot of them. Some of them don't even play a tool that can boost their damage to one shot on Iron Hand. So then you're having to use like a Dusclops or a Dusknoir, and it just feels horrible. So, but if you do play a tool, it's still just like really hard to deal with. Like an Iron Hand is just super annoying to deal with. And they just trade like Lugia. It's like sometimes setting up can be a challenge, as people know. But like when you do set up, you're like the most broken deck in the format. So. And I think it's definitely more consistent than people give it credit for, especially if you're playing Rahul's list with the Squawkabilly. It gives you that extra out to like set up. Yeah, you might have to discard some resources, but usually if you're using Squawk, you have a good chance of getting a turn 2 double Archeops. So yeah, that's kind of how I feel about Lugia right now. It's definitely one of my top picks going into Louisville.
Awesome. Yeah, and I've even seen some people. Obviously, there's an Iron Bundle in there. I've even seen people play a Thornton in some Lugia lists, so you can
Yeah.
pull out the Sinnoh and not get it sniped by a Dust Noir, which is pretty cool. I like that
Yeah,
too.
it's pretty popular in Japan.
Right. Yeah. So we're gonna flip the script here, and we're gonna go in backwards order, kind of spin it around a little bit here. So Jesse, we're gonna go back to you on this next topic here because you got some experience with this one too. We're gonna be talking about lightning decks. So the first one we're gonna talk about is Miraidon EX. Now Miraidon did get some powerful tools in using Terapagos' stadium in the Area Zero, and then we pulled out our Mewtwo EX from the binder and put it in this deck so now Raikou can hit big numbers. Do you think that Miraidon is going to see some play at this tournament? Because we haven't seen it really other than a one top 8 slot. Um, and we definitely haven't seen it at a North American regional place really well in some time. So what are your thoughts on Miraidon for this tournament?
Yeah, I think Miraidon is decently positioned. It's definitely better positioned than it was for Baltimore, because
Mm,
Baltimore, we had for whatever reason we had a lot of ancient box hype.
mm-hmm.
And that's just like not a great matchup for Miraidon. It's like doable, but that like the little bit of rise in ancient box, like I think it ended up being like 6 or 7% at the tournament,
Mm-hmm.
also raised like Charizard's numbers, and
Right.
both of those decks are bad for Miraidon. So that's just like another deck on top of like the bad Charizard and sus Raging Bolt matchup from Miraidon. So
Mm-hmm.
I just knew that wasn't the play for Baltimore. But for this event, I don't know. It looks okay. I mean, your Trapagos matchup is like not that bad because like I said, an Iron Hands is a really good way to deal with the Trapagos or just Dusknoir in general. I mean, you hit Palkia for weakness, so
Mm-hmm.
just get attacking turn one. Like Trapagos has like one flaw, and that's that it literally can't attack on the first turn going second.
Mm-hmm.
But Miraidon can, and even if they do play a tool like a Vitality Band or Defiance Band to KO Iron Hands, if you get a Bravery Charm on an Iron Hands, they're not KOing it, and Iron Hands can just take 4 prizes by itself.
Right.
The scary thing about Miraidon is when you don't do that, and they play Buffalant, then their Trapagos is basically invincible. So
Mm-hmm.
there you can't really do anything about that. That feels horrible. But I think Miraidon's fine. I mean, Lugia, as we were just saying, seems pretty hyped. So I think that's always been like a pretty solid matchup. Definitely
Mm-hmm.
not as good as people make it out to be. It's definitely pretty close in my opinion.
Right.
But I just think Miraidon's just always going to be a solid low to the ground deck. Similar to the Terapagos Dusknoir, just a big basic attacking deck is never going to be bad. So you can just take advantage of people's slow starts. And like I said, I think Charizard is fairly weak right now, so I think that's a good thing for Miraidon. So who knows? Might roll up with it, might not. I'm not really sure yet. Still trying to figure that out. So yeah, and then you asked about Iron Thorns
Oh yeah,
or
yeah.
just
Iron
Miraidon.
Thorns is the next one we're going to talk about here
Oh, okay,
too.
cool.
But yeah, I mean, Iron Thorns is still on everybody's mind. So we look at the meta and look at all of these EX Pokemon with abilities, and we see tons of Raging Bull. Right? We've got Teal Mask as their engine. Obviously, Lugia shuts that right down. Miraidon can shut that down. Is Iron Thorns an actually good play for this upcoming regional?
Yeah, Iron Thorns seems pretty solid, honestly. Its matchup spread on paper looks pretty good.
Mm,
I think the thing stopping a lot of people and honestly myself from wanting to play it is that you just don't really feel like you have a lot of control over your games. You're just like it's definitely like when people say like Raging Bull or Miraidon are like easy decks to play, that's nothing compared to Iron Thorns. That deck is just like attach and
yeah.
swing, like and play a support. There is a little bit of nuance to it, playing the right support at the right time, which energy you pass back. But honestly, like that deck, I think that factor is like steers a lot of like strong players away from picking it.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's a good meta call, it's a good meta call. I mean, Fernando showed that at
Right.
Worlds. You don't have to play the most complicated deck to win a tournament. It's a good meta call. Then that's sometimes all you need. Hit the
Mm-hmm.
right matchups. And yeah, I think its matchups seem pretty solid. I think the Trapagos matchup is better than I thought it was in combination to Judge and Enhanced Hammer.
Mm-hmm.
You can really like disrupt their knockdowns they have in their hand for the second turn. And then Enhanced Hammer can just get rid of those double turbos. They don't have quick search to search it out because you're lacking abilities. So I think that's really good for Iron Thorns. A lot of these ability focused decks like Lugia is pretty much an auto win. Dragapult is a pretty scary matchup, so I'd be worried about that.
Mm-hmm.
But across the board, it's just like pretty solid. It does okay against Reggie Drago, decks like that. Even Gardevoir, it can beat if you draw well enough, and some of the turbo decks it can beat if
Right.
they just are too reliant on abilities. So yeah, honestly, Iron Thorn seems pretty good. I don't know if I see myself playing it, but it's definitely a solid deck for sure. I'd say if you like aren't confident in like your ability to play one of the top decks well, I say honestly just roll up with Iron Thorns and just like try to like hit a bunch of Lugias and just rocket yourself up to the top standings doing that.
Gotcha. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's kind of like where my mind goes. So, Eliza, out of those two decks, which one would you be playing and why at this upcoming regional?
Uh, if I had, okay, so you're putting me in a tight spot because I hate both these decks personally. But I think if I had to choose between the two of them, I would just pick Maridon. And it's like Jesse said, you feel like you have more agency with Maridon. And sure, I'm not the best player in the room, and so maybe Thorns might be a better pick for me, but I still know my way around lines. I still want to feel like I'm active. I'm an active participant in my game, and I do play a lot of control. So it's funny to say I want to be actively playing the game. But Iron Thorns is a style of control that I see why it's strong. I see why people play it. I don't hate people that play it, but it's not something I would ever personally touch. But looking at the stats, looking between Joinville, Dortmund, and Peru special event, which I know we only have the top 8 for, but looking at the counts of day 2s, like which deck has the most day 2s and stuff like that, Thorns has the 7th most, and Maridon isn't even on the list. The lowest one is Palkia and Guardy, both tied at 7.
Yeah.
And so Maridon has less than that, and Thorns is at 12. And so maybe Thorns is just better, but I could never play it because I want that agency. If I'm gonna spend money to travel to a regional, I want to play at the regional.
Right. Exactly. Now, hopping over to you, Nolan, I know that with your last deck choice, both of those decks look like a free win for you. But into this regional, now we're a little bit more scared of things popping up. Maybe even somebody's putting a Raichu in their deck to get around Cornerstone for some silly reason. What do you think about picking up one of these decks? If you're a new player that's out there, listening to this meta forecast, are you going to suggest either one of these decks to somebody coming in?
I would hands down suggest Iron Thorns. I think people overrate having agency in their games. Maybe it feels nice, but it's not going to actually change whether you're going to be more likely to do well in the regional or not. Maybe the opposite actually, because you're more likely to misplay.
Yeah.
But I would definitely recommend Iron Thorns. It's one of my top choices actually for the event.
Sure.
I think everything except the Pult matchup feels really solid for the deck. Besides, like, if the people play tech cards in Lugia or Drago, it changes things. But I think Pult's the only deck you'd really be scared of seeing that's of the top decks. I think you can tech to beat the Trapagos matchup pretty well. It's not going to be an auto win or anything, but you can make it favored with the E-Hammer. Even techs like Grabber I've been testing out that are pretty decent, like taking a Noctowl out of their hand. So yeah, I would definitely lean to Thorns. I think Maridon suffers from 2 of the top probably 3 decks going to be Raging Bolt and Charizard, I expect. And I think Maridon has a tough time into both those. So I wouldn't touch that deck, to be honest.
That's an interesting tech that you're bringing up, Grabber. That's a card we haven't seen in some time, since Mew VMAX. So Pokemon Grabber is pretty cool. If you don't know what that is and you're listening to this, you get to look at your opponent's hand and you get to put one of their Pokemon. It's at the bottom of their deck, yeah? Yeah.
I should know. It's somewhere.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
It's that's a pretty good tech card, especially into those. So I think that, thinking about it on the grand scheme of things, if I'm sleeving up a Lightning deck, it's probably going to be Thorns, just based on the meta right now. Maridon does seem like a pretty fun deck to play. But speaking of fun decks to play, Nolan, we're going to hop back over to you here and talk about Palkia. Now, Palkia is a deck that was really good for forever, and when we got this Area 0, we thought, ooh, Palkia's back, because now we can Skyfield ourselves to victory and make our bench nice and wide so we can have a bigger damage output. But it turns out playing with old cards still makes Palkia good. So what do we think about this Palkia deck that's seen such success? We even saw Stefan Ivanov really make a deep run with this deck, and we see a lot of more heavily skilled players gravitate towards this type of Dusknoir deck over something else. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's also one of my top choices for the event. This is the Palkia Dusknoir deck
Mm.
that Stefan run basically. I think it's very strong. It has great matchups into a lot of the meta, assuming you go first. I think that's a bit of one of my qualms about the deck is the coin flip often determines how well you're going to do into a lot of the matchups. I think some of the pros for the deck is it actually has a pretty strong Terapagos matchup with your
Mm-hmm.
fighting type Greninja EX, and that can help counter some of your weaknesses like Iron Thorns and Miraidon if those show up. And it has a lot of options to it, so it really has a game plan to really any deck in the meta. It takes a little bit of a worse matchup into the Raging Bolt, having to bench two prizers, but I think it has a lot of other pros over the Terapagos deck that it affords at that cost.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Eliza, have you even touched this deck yet, or have you seen it be played?
Yeah,
Okay.
so once I saw Stefan's list, I did, I just net decked it. I brought it
Mm-hmm.
to a few events and had a lot of fun with it. I think it's an incredibly powerful deck. I think it's super solid, but like Nolan said, it's very coin flip dependent on that very first turn of the game. Um, but we've seen a lot of people on social media posting that they're bringing Palkia Dustnor, whether Stefan's list or slightly edited, they're bringing these to locals, they're bringing these to online events, and they're finding a lot of success with it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas we didn't see a whole lot of Palkia too much. Like it's been here and there, but it hasn't seen like crazy success. I feel like ever since Stefan's run, more people have been getting eyes on it, more people have been tweaking it. I feel like its popularity is just gonna. I think we're gonna see a lot more of it at Louisville than we have anywhere else so far.
Right. Yeah, and I think so too. I think that we are going to see it. I want to ask you, Jesse, how you think that this fares into decks like Terapagos, into decks like Raging Bull, and then talk about some of the techs that we have here too. Because I know that some people were putting Rotom V in for an extra draw support engine, taking the Rotom out, now looking at Stefan's list. Some people were talking about adding a thicker Greninja EX line because it seems to be so good in this meta right now. So what are you thinking when it comes to Palkia Dustnor?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I haven't played a single game of Palkia Dustnor, so I don't have any strong opinions on it overall.
Okay.
I've pretty much put a decent amount of time into every of the big meta decks,
Mm.
except for this one. Um, but it definitely seems really strong. Whenever I watch people stream and they're playing it, it definitely seems really good. And I watched some of Stefan's stream games from Dortmund, and it definitely seemed very powerful. And even in some of the games where he was like, not drawing very well, it definitely still felt like he had like routes and stuff, plays to make.
Mm.
So I definitely think it's cool. Like it's like that we have like a really strong Radiant Greninja deck back in the meta,
Mm-hmm.
because I think Radiant Greninja was like one of the most powerful cards for a long time, and it's still good for draw. But
Yeah.
after Chen Pao kind of fell out of favor, there hasn't really been any strong Greninja decks, so a lot of people started cutting Manaphy. And now like this is a deck that can really use Greninja as well as Dusknoir in the second turn of the game. So it is probably like the strongest deck if like they were saying earlier about if you win the coin flip and go first. It does feel like a lot of decks do want to go first right now, so that is like worrisome for it. But I mean, you just win the coin flip, go first. I mean, going second's not that bad either. Get to play Irida, Iono or something, so have a stronger setup. So yeah, honestly, I don't have any really strong opinions just because I haven't actually played games of the deck.
Gotcha.
But it definitely seems powerful. Probably not something I'm going to be looking to playing just because I don't have enough time to practice it leading up to the event.
Right.
But yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too that we didn't really touch on is that it does play Radiant Greninja, and Radiant Greninja is an active attacker in the deck, which we can't say for Raging Bolt. So where we look at all these decks that have squishy single prize attackers, we now have Radiant Greninja that can take a 2-prize turn, where everything is either 2 or 4 prize turns in this meta. So it's something that you have to consider as now I have an extra single prize attacker that can take a 2-prize turn. That isn't it doesn't start with the letter D, I guess. So as far as that goes, back to you, Jesse. Now we're gonna play Pick Your Fighter here on the 2 Teal Mask decks. We got Teal Mask Ogrepon in the left corner with Raging Bolt as the partner, and on the right hand side we've got Regidrago V-Star. Both seem to be very good decks into this next tournament. So which one would you pick and why?
I honestly kind of like Raging Bull. I think it gets a lot of I think top players give it a lot of hate. But I can understand why. I mean, there's definitely has some really unfavorable matchups, but it is just very low to the. I'm a big fan of like low to the ground, consistent, straightforward decks, and the deck kind of does what it wants to do every game, which I kind of like, and that can just carry you into wins. But I do have to go with Regidrago because Regidrago has more options. It is a very just again a deck that when it goes first can just have some really nasty turn twos, both with just attacking with Dragapult very consistently turn 2, and then the option of using Kyurem, which is still very, very strong. Especially if these Fan Rotom Trapagos, Noctowl decks aren't playing the Bouffalants, you can always, even if they're playing Manaphy, you can still like Cologne, Prime Catcher Cologne, do that play on them, which can just win games. So I think I'd have to go with Regidrago. It just feels good to play. It's still really, very strong. If I had to play one of the two, I think I would choose Regidrago.
Gotcha. All right, Eliza. Now, as far as Regidrago goes, I know that that's kind of where we're going to start to look at text because there's not a whole lot of text that you can add into Raging Bolt because it is, a very simple, simply built deck. But we're looking at some cards like maybe Noivern EX to combat some of the newer meta, with Terapagos being good, maybe playing against these Raging Bolt decks. So what do you think about adding that into a Regidrago V-Star list? Are we just taking it out, being more consistent, or are we going to start to tech out Regidrago V-Star?
I think at the very least, Noivern should definitely be back in the deck. I know a lot of people are against Noivern being in Regidrago since its damage is pretty low, and then you can always just gust around it either through Prime Catcher Boss or Bundle Boss or whatever you have. Like, it's not hard to get around the Noivern effect, but forcing your opponent to have it is so valuable. And there's a lot of people that will just be like, oh, well, we'll just double Dusknoir you. But if you're double Dusknoiring me, it's probably not meant to be for that matchup. So there's no real reason to have it there, except, I guess, for Terapagos. But I don't know. I feel like Regidrago is going to have to start pulling out some extra stuff just to... Because the two most successful decks so far, based off of the lame numbers that I pulled, were Terapagos and Bolt. So it needs to start finding a way to handle those and keep up its inconsistency. And you can't really have both of those, so maybe cheesing some wins with Noivern is the way to go. I still like Hisui and Gujar in the deck. I know it's with Dusknoir, everyone can just get around it anyway, but I don't have a whole lot of experience on Drago. I've helped a lot of people like practice it and get the lines down and stuff like that, but I think teching is probably the way Drago has to go moving forward.
Yeah. Okay. Now, going on to you, Nolan, we're looking at Raging Bolt, and there hasn't been too much variance, but there's been talks out there to add Bravery Charms back. Obviously, it might help slightly favor you into these Terapagos matchups. It might help you into, obviously, Mirror a little bit more. What are you thinking about Raging Bull? If you're looking at the list, looking at the meta, are we going to put Charms back in?
I'll admit I'm not the Raging Bolt connoisseur or anything, but just looking at the meta and how I've been playing against Raging Bolt, I think the Charms do have a place in the meta. It does suck playing a Pokestop deck and throwing these items in, or your tools in, but I think they really play a pivotal role against the Terapagos matchup, and they can also help out just across the board into decks like Regidrago, Lugia, as well as just basically across the board, every matchup it has utility. But it really gives you a shot against the Terapagos matchup, which without those, you're really in a tough situation, as they can just set up their one prize board and then just chase down your liabilities on the bench that you're forced to put down.
Yeah. And the other thing I've noticed is that some people are trying to swap out the Sandy Shocks for the Slitherwing, I think it is. One of those. And that's in combatants of Lugia decks too, because they have Iron Hands. And then obviously we'll see maybe an Iron Thorns or something like that come into play, where that's a pretty good tech against those. So that was the other thing I wanted to mention here. Now we're going to talk about what everybody's wondering, what the best Terapagos list is for Louisville. So we're going to talk about the tech. So no, sorry, not Alolan Nolan. Nolan, what do you think should be in a Terapagos list? Should we have a 4/4 line of Owls? Do you think we should be playing the Buffaloes? What are we thinking?
Yeah, I've played around with the deck a lot, trying a lot of different options, and a lot of them feel pretty good. I think there's a lot of different ways you can go with the deck, and I think it has a lot of flexibility in that, as you can adapt to the meta and see what's needed. I think the 4/4 Owl, or at least like a 4/3 Owl, is really strong. That card's just pivotal in the deck. It makes everything work.
Mm.
And you can kind of sacrifice, go down to a 1/1 Pidgeot seems to be acceptable for the most part. Another inclusion I like is the Bouffalants are pretty good. They help against Drago, Lugia, any Dragapult. They help a lot across the board. They're a bit difficult to get down turn one at times, but even getting them down later in the game can still be quite impactful. What additionally, I think I like some of the builds that have the 4 Terapagos. I find with the deck, like, you often have outs to either the Fan Rotom or the Terapagos turn one. And like if you get judged or Iono'd on that turn, finding the Terapagos or having it down already can be the difference between having a turn where you pop off with the Owls or you pass and it goes back to your opponent. So I think having that consistent build with lots of outs to Terapagos and a Fan Rotom is the way to go.
Absolutely. Now we're going to talk about some energy in here. I know that some people have kind of moved to like a 3 double turbo energy and a jet build, which I know that I myself, Zach Lesage, we're kind of like going back and forth and talking about. Some people are just saying we're going to get rid of the jet energy. Eliza, what do you think on the energy count? And I've even seen some of the stadium counts go down to 3-2 in these lists.
Yeah, so in terms of the energy counts, I haven't touched a whole lot of Terapagos, so like obviously take everything I say about the deck with a grain of salt. But I like the 3 double turbos and the 1 jet. I think the 1 jet is incredibly important for the deck in order to be able to get out of weird situations. And then if someone throws down a temple, you're able to throw down the jet, so that way you're still able to get 2 energy onto it without having to lose an entire other double turbo at the cost of cutting a double turbo from your list. I think the jet has a lot of niches in the deck. I don't think you can if you're gonna cut the jet, it has to be for 4th double turbo, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I think going down on energy any more than that is just asking for trouble. I don't know. I haven't touched much of the deck to like really have an opinion on the energy counts on it, but I feel like you have to at least be running 4. What those are, dealer's choice, I guess, but yeah. I personally think that the 4 double I think the 4 double turbo is objectively worse than the 3 double turbo in the jet, but like I said, I haven't touched it much.
Gotcha. All right, Jesse. So with the games that you might have played with it, I know that we've obviously seen a lot of these builds start to cut some of the Dust Noir line, where they're going 3 Dust Skulls, 4 Rare Candies, and then the 2 Dust Noirs, and cutting Dusclops completely. And then also adding Vitality Band. Obviously, that's something we've already been talking about a couple of times on this forecast. Do you think that that's correct going into Louisville? Do we think that cutting down that Dusclops out of the list is correct, or what is your perfect 60 for Terapagos?
So I agree with Nolan. I think 4 Terapagos is really, really strong. I mean, that's your main attacker. It activates your Noctowl. I don't know if you've ever played the deck when you have a Noctowl, but you don't have an out to Terapagos. It feels horrible. So like, why not just play 4 of those turtles? You know, you need them. So like, just play 4. I feel the same about double turbo. I think you can get away with 3 and maybe play the jet. Like, that's fine. But I don't know. 4 double turbos feels really good. It's amazing to just naturally have one in your hand. If not, you're having to Pidgeot search for it. So if you just have one in your hand, now you can Pidgeot search for something else. So I definitely agree. Cutting Dusclops feels correct, and just playing like 4 Rare Candy. You're just playing 2 or 3 Duskulls. I think a 3/3 Noctowl has honestly felt fine, because I've been playing a 2/2 Pidgeot from what I've learned. I just feel like I want Pidgeot every single game so I can find my double turbo energies. So I've just been playing, a 3-3 with a 2-2, and then I've been playing the Bouffalants. I've been taking towards approach and playing the Bouffalants. I think what the Bouffalants offer, I think the worst thing about the Bouffalants is that you have to it takes up slots in your deck,
Right.
but it feels so much better going second when you can just have that protection from Regidrago. Like those cards carry you against Regidrago specifically. Like they can't Kyurem you, they can't Giratina knock out your Trapagos because you have 290 HP. And they're just bench fillers, so having extra bench fillers is never bad.
Right.
Nolan mentioned it is kind of harder to get them out on the first turn sometimes, but honestly, if you can just if your hand's good enough, if you can like fan road them for one Hoot Hoot and two of the Bouffalants, and then have another out to a Pidgey, I think that's enough. Like you can have a board of like Terapagos, Pidgey, two Boofs, and one Hoot Hoot. As long as you have one Hoot Hoot, you can function. And then the next turn you can put the stadium down, go wide, bench more, as many Hooters as you want. So yeah, honestly, and I think it's really interesting because the deck kind of reminds me of like obviously like Palkia and Inteleon with Inteleon's Shady Dealings ability lets you search for two trainers. So you can play all these like random one-of supporters. Like you can play, if you're worried about, not having the jet for the pivot, play a Penny, play a Turo. Turo's like scoop up net about a supporter. Right. You can reuse your Noctowl. You don't have to play any draw supporters because Noctowl is just so broken. And that in the combination with Pidgeot and Pheasantipity, you can search for 3 cards, basically any 3 cards that you want out of your deck each turn, which is like incredibly broken. So you can honestly just play we even see Graham Manley. He played 1 draw support. He played 1 Iono. That's all he played. So like you don't have to play like that many draw supporters, to be honest with you, and just make more room for like the item cards and the thicker Pidgeot line. So that's kind of how I've been playing it from what I've learned from like watching videos and just watching streams and playing it myself. That definitely feels like to me the strongest way to play the deck, but I'm still testing leading up to Louisville, so my opinions might change on that.
Gotcha. All right.
I can add like one thing on the Trapagos deck. One card I would definitely play that I haven't seen people playing is a copy of Judge.
Yeah.
I think that really swings the mirror matchup, so you have to go second. And just in general, being able to Noctowl for Judge, put your opponent down to low hand size, Dusknoir their board, and knock out the active. Just
what about the grabber?
Seems really good.
Yeah, the grabber.
The grabber too. Yeah, get everything in there. But I think the Judge also like into like your Charizard matchup as well when you try to KO their Charmanders and you're trying to take away their options for the Thornton play.
Yeah.
I think it has a lot of utility on a bunch of your tougher matchups.
Absolutely. All right, Jesse, I'm going to have you list off what are your top 5 picks for going into Louisville.
Okay, top 5. I definitely have a top 3. The 4th and 5th might be kind of hard. As of right now, honestly, like if I had to play right now, probably just Rahul's Lugia 60, honestly, would be a number 1 choice. Number 2, I gotta go with Miraidon. I love my boy Miraidon. He seems like decently positioned for this tournament from what I've seen. Number 3, maybe Iron Thorns, honestly. I actually kind of like Iron Thorns right now. I think it's like just turn your brain off. It's kind of a vibe. Just kind of sit there, try to hit some Lugias, That sounds kind of like sounds like fun to me. My opponent's might not be having fun, but I think number 4 for me is Terapagos Dusknoir. I think that deck is probably the best deck right now, but I don't feel incredibly confident piloting it, honestly. Like you can definitely like the mirror match. I just don't have enough experience in the mirror match right now. That might change between now and this weekend, but I think like if I felt 100% confident with that deck, I would definitely roll up with that for sure. And then number 5, probably not Regidrago. I don't know. Regidrago feels kind of. I mean, it's definitely good. Number 5 would probably be. I don't know, man. We'll just say I can't think of a good 5th one, so I guess I'll just go with freaking Goldengo.
There you go.
Goldengo's kind of sick. I played it at NAIC. Man. I have some experience with it. I think the deck is a lot better than people give it credit for.
That's true.
Shout out to I'm probably butchering his name. Shout out to Yele for getting 3rd with it at Dortmund. But I think the better Palkia deck is probably just with Dusknoir, but Goldengo is kind of sick.
There you go. All right, Eliza, agree, disagree? What are your thoughts on the top 5 picks going into Louisville?
If I was going, I would definitely... It would be Rahul 60. It would be the thing that I'm trying to get practice on if I was going. I said earlier that I would just roll up with my 60 because I just don't like Rahul's version, but honestly it's because I just don't have enough time on Rahul's version. If I was going, I would just be slamming practice on it. I would roll up with that. If I didn't have the time to practice, I'd be playing my 60 with the inclusion of the Shuckle Obsidian Flames. Um, if I if I was told not to play Lugia, I think my third choice would be Dragapult. I played it to locals tonight, didn't have any practice on it, and it went a lot better than I thought it would. I think the deck's incredibly strong. I've been interested in it for a while, and so if I could get just a bit more practice on it, I'd roll up with Dragapult. If I had to pick a fourth deck, it'd be Blocklax. I think people are sleeping on it. I don't hear anybody talk. Yeah, that's fair. I get it, but like, no one's talking about it. People are cutting their pennies. People are cutting their Turos. A lot of decks that used to run Switch or Switch cards are like cutting their counts on it. Like, it seems weirdly strong for this meta. And if I had to pick a fifth deck, I think I would also just pick Goldango. I have it sleeved and built. Like, I want it to work so bad. Whenever Yelly does well with it, I'm just like, I gotta play Goldango. And then I play it for like 3 games, and I'm like, man, I miss Lugia. And then I go back to Lugia. But I think my fifth pick would be Goldango, and that would pretty much be I'm just chilling. I want to have fun. Like, let me just draw my deck.
That's fair. All right, Nolan, thoughts on top 5 picks for Louisville?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Eliza and Jesse said. Don't know about the order on these. I think I have 6 decks that I know you said 5, but I think top of my list would be some of these Dusknoir decks, like the Palkia Dusknoir deck would probably be number 1 for me, followed up by the Trapagos deck. After that, I think I'd probably put like Iron Thorns. And then behind that, I think Regidrago is pretty strong right now. Kyurem has a lot of utility in the meta, as well as Dragapult and Hawlucha combos. And then after that, Lugia and Pulse both seem solid. So I think those are kind of my top options going into Louisville.
Perfect. All right, we're going to hop over to my favorite part of these meta forecasts, and that's the rogue decks here. So we're going to start off with you, Nolan, because you did play a rogue-ish deck to Baltimore and did pretty well with it. So what would be your top pick for a rogue deck into this regional, something that hasn't seen a lot of play or a lot of success that you think could do well?
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't play the Cornerstone Ogrepon deck right now. That it seems pretty terrible into these Dusknoir decks. So don't bring that if you're thinking about it. I don't know. It's kind of hard to decide what actually is considered rogue in this meta. It's kind of everything is up in the air. It's a really wide meta. Like if someone brought Cloth now, I guess isn't considered rogue, and Goldango isn't considered rogue at this point. So it's kind of like what is rogue, I guess. Maybe Lost Box at this point considered a rogue pick. I don't know. I don't think it's a great choice either, to be honest. But if I had to go with a rogue deck, maybe a Lost Box would make it up there for me.
Gotcha. I'm gonna give a shout out to my local and semi-half cousin Will out of the Syracuse area. Will played a Dusknoir Lost Zone deck and got second at their local challenge with, I think there was 41 players there at the challenge, something like that. But made it work, made Lost Box work again. So shout out to Selecting Flowers, I guess. Eliza, what rogue deck do you have on your mind for this coming weekend?
It's like Nolan said, the meta is so wide. It's really hard to like pinpoint like what people would consider rogue if Goldango's out of the question, if Cloth's out of the question, I'm assuming Blocklax is out of the question. It would be Lost Box, but for the sake of being unique, I guess I'll go with Future Box. Future Box, its biggest issue has always just been consistency. But I feel like with the addition of Pheasantipity and stuff like that, it has a chance to make a comeback. I don't think Reboot Pod is going to be the A-spec to run in it. I just feel like there's too many other better options. But that would be like the rogue deck I'm hoping for to do well. Otherwise, I don't really have faith in any, including that. I don't have faith in any rogue decks right now. Like anything that would have a good finish already has.
You want to put Iron Treads in your Future Box list and call it a day?
I put Iron Treads in my Toxicity deck because Iron Treads counts as 2 types,
There
and
you go.
Toxicity is just Rainbow Road. But
Bingo.
is Guardy Rogue now? Can I say Guardy?
Yeah,
I was
I
gonna
mean,
say, I was gonna say that.
Guardy is unfortunately a rogue deck now because of Dustnor decks, but yes.
Fortunately.
But yeah, definitely cool. Jesse, anything on your mind for a rogue deck here?
I'm gonna go with Dialga V-Star, baby. I'm gonna go
Ooh,
first. I'm gonna
okay.
bench all my Beldums, and I'm gonna turn 2 evolve all my Matangs. I'm gonna make some metal. I'm gonna Star Chronos, and then it's GG. So yeah, that's what I'm doing. If I could snap my fingers and make Trapagos have like 220 HP, then I think the deck might actually be a little bit better. But unfortunately, that's not the case. So you're forced to play like a freaking maximum belt.
Yeah,
to be
you
able
play
to
like 4
one-shot
Vitality
them.
belts, easy.
Oh, Vitality Band. Yeah, there
Yeah.
you go. You can play Vitality Band. There
Yeah.
you go. Yeah, and some Arvins maybe. But yeah, Dialga. I missed that deck, man. That deck was so. I love when the tournament Andrew Hedrick won the tournament. I played it there and I ID'd to the top 32 with it, and I loved that deck. I thought it was so much fun.
Yeah.
Probably favorite deck I played all year, even more than Miraidon.
Nice.
So I'm really sad that deck fell out of favor, but I think now it would be considered rogue. But if I had to play like a rogue deck, then I probably would roll up with Dialga for sure.
Gotcha. Well, I'm gonna give mine here because it's my show and why not? So my picks for rogue decks. I mean, I always will love Snorlax. I think Snorlax is actually pretty well. It's not technically rogue, but another deck I've been having a lot of fun at other people's expenses at because there's a ton of item based decks. Is Item Lock, and not necessarily in the Banette form that we've seen at these past couple of regionals here. And then I did see Sky was also playing just the Banette Dustnor deck that Henry Brand had kind of piloted at Worlds. But I've been really just going ham on the ladder on TCGL with Venomoth Frostlass. And that's been a deck that I've had a lot of success. So if somebody can take Venomoth Frostlass to Louisville and make a deep run, shout out to you. We'll definitely cover that in a video here, but there's definitely some cool ways you can play, some cool new cards people aren't seeing or definitely not using in their deck list that can be put in there, and I think that could be a funny little deck that shows up.
I mean,
So
Mateus
you're-
got top 16,
Oh,
top
yeah?
16 with Item Lock. So I mean,
That's
clearly,
right.
it's viable. I mean, Item Lock is as strong as ever. I mean, Trapagos plays a million items,
That's
or
right.
just Dustnor decks in general. So lock those items. I actually think that probably is like the best deck that's the most underrepresented, to be honest with you. I think that deck is really strong, but I just think a lot of people just either don't have the patience for it or just don't really want to put time into it.
Exactly.
I was so excited though. I thought you were gonna say you've been putting time into Galvantula. I got like
Oh,
3
no.
sleeved Galvantula decks next to me. I got my Joltik plushie. Like I was so amped, and then you were like Venomoth. That's the
Venomoth.
last thing I want to see.
R.I.P. You can play Reggie's and put a 1/1 Galvantula line in there and call it a day.
I got a 2/2.
There you go.
Got a 2/2 in Reggie's. Got my Blissey deck. Unfortunately, Battle Pass isn't a card anymore, so it just doesn't work.
Yeah, that happens. Shout out to Reggie's, all the Reggie enjoyers out there that still want to play it but can't.
Precious Carrier coming soon.
That's right. All right, Jesse, we want to bring an element of humanization to this meta forecast. It's not all Pokemon. So it's fall, it's spooky season. I want you to tell me what your favorite spooky Pokemon and spooky movie are. And we'll go.
Spooky Pokemon? Jeez, I don't know. It's hard not to pick Gengar. I'm going to be edgy and not pick Gengar because that's like everybody's favorite Pokemon.
Yep.
I'm gonna go with Chandelure. I think Chandelure is really sick. I thought Chandelure was really cool when the gym leader had it in the black and white. I just was like, this Pokemon's really cool. I don't know. It's just stuff like it's so stupid at first glance. It's a chandelier, but I don't know. It's something endearing about it. Like over time, I've liked it even more. So I've got to go with Chandelure.
Cool.
Favorite spooky movie? I'm not really big into scary. Like I'm really big into movies, but honestly, not like horror films or scary movies. But if I had to pick, probably my favorite is a movie called It Follows, which is just a really creepy movie about a thing that follows this girl. And it's like, definitely watch it. Highly recommend. It's a very, very good movie. I like it a lot. It's definitely really creepy and probably my favorite horror movie.
Nice, very cool. All right, Eliza, over to you. Favorite spooky Pokemon and spooky movie?
My favorite spooky Pokemon would have to be Pumpkaboo. Like, it's literally just a walking jack-o'-lantern, and the entire reason I have my Joltik plushie is because of Night March back in the day, so I gotta pick Pumpkaboo to go hand in hand with that.
There you go.
As for spooky movies, I also am not super big into horror. If I had to pick a horror movie, it would probably just be Silent Hill.
Okay.
Just because I like the Silent Hill games, and I thought it was a decent movie adaptation of them.
Right.
Um, if I could pick a fake spooky movie, it would be Clue with Tim Curry.
Ooh.
I actually make it a point to
That
watch
was
that
fun.
every Halloween because it's technically a murder mystery,
Right.
and like what's more spooky than that, right?
Exactly. All right, very cool. And Nolan, over to you. Favorite spooky Pokemon and spooky movie.
Yeah, I thought of this before Jesse said Chandelier, but I was going with Lampent.
Oh,
So
Okay.
okay.
switch it up a little bit. I know lamps are pretty scary. Some people. In the spooky movie, I guess if we're going like the horror genre, I like The Shining,
Okay.
Stephen King.
Solid.
That's a classic.
Solid
for me.
movie. Hopefully they don't remake it because I heard that they were gonna try.
Oh, it's
But
gonna be bad.
Oh,
please
changing my
ruin-
answer to Pet
Ruin the
Cemetery.
nostalgia.
yeah, right. Pet
You just
Sematary.
reminded me of old horror movies.
Oh.
Pet Cemetery. Swap me to that.
The Stephen King ones are the best. Yeah. So that kind of concludes things here. So we're gonna give everybody their chance to shout out anybody they want to that's watching, and also where they can find you online. So Nolan, we'll start off with you here.
Shout out to my mom and dad for whatever.
Awesome.
Where to find me? I'm on Twitter. I don't even know what my handle is. Look up Nolan Randall, maybe you'll find me. Randall_Knowles or something like
There
that.
you go.
But yeah,
We'll put it in
find me
there.
there.
Awesome. And Eliza, we know that you live on X. So as far as shout outs go, let me know what shout outs you have and where the people can find you.
Yeah, so obviously shout outs to Girl Power for always giving me a space where I can just hang out and talk about whatever while also still having a space to talk about the TCG. Um, Most important shout out to my wife Emily, who we started recording at like 10 p.m. and that's when she finishes her work from home shift. So she got off work and has been as quiet as she can this whole time. And so bless her for being incredibly tolerant of me and everything I do. And then as for where to find me, it's just on X. It's at Eliza Sheet Posts. Sheet like spreadsheets because I like spreadsheets.
Solid.
Other than that, there's not really anywhere else to find me. I'm doing card sleeves blind test soon. So if you know of any brands that want to get in that aren't one of the 12 I'm up to they're already in. They sent me FCBC's in, Katana's in, Dragon Shields, Eclipse, Immaculates, the new one that just dropped. I don't even remember their name.
They look really cool though.
Endgame.
What is that called? Endgame. Yeah.
Yeah. They're in. There's like I wanted to sleeve each deck with just like a single basic type of energy, but I have more brands than there are types now. So, but if anyone else wants to get in, hit me up. I want free sleeves, and it's working out. So.
Perfect. Jesse, we're going to hop over to you. Any shout outs and where people can find you?
Yeah, so you can just find me on X at Jesse Parker. My name with no A in the Parker. So Jesse Parker, no A in the Parker. You can also find me over on Tricky Gym. I stream pretty regularly on that channel, Tricky Gym or twitch.tv/Tricky Gym. I stream there like every other Wednesday, so you can see me there. But I'm mostly just on Twitter.
Awesome. And right before we go, make sure that you're giving your shout outs to Shuckle. Number one, all the sponsors that help make the Shuffle Squad possible. You can check out the description of this video below and see all the hyperlinks to all of our great sponsors like PTCGL Store, Kayfabe Cards, and Ultimate Guard. And we will be hosting a lot of other cool things over on our website and over on Metafy. So make sure you're checking out our new Metafy groups and our website and all things Shuffle Squad. Thank you so much to all the guests that were joining me here, and hopefully this helped you with your metagame predictions going forward into Louisville. We hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you're liking the video and subscribing to the channel for more competitive Pokemon TCG content like this. But for now, we're going to head out of here so we can get prepared for this regional. We will catch you next time here on the Shuffle Squad.
Want to support the Shuffle Squad? Be sure to check out all of our sponsors in the description to pick up Pokemon TCG singles, sealed, and PTCG live codes. You made it to the end. Thank you so much for watching this entire video from the Shuffle Squad. Honestly, from the bottom of our hearts, we appreciate each and every person that supports our content, watches what we have going on every single day, every single week, even from time to time, and continuously allows us to have a forum to project our creative content towards the Pokemon TCG community. So if you haven't already, be sure to give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and even leave a comment to help boost the YouTube algorithm. That being said, we'll catch you with our next video. Thanks again. Take it easy.